There we go. There we go. Let's do that again. Thanks for your patience. Today we are going to do a very bold comparison between popular iridology, which you might know as North American or Jensenian iridology, versus holistic iridology, which is also known as constitutional iridology. And so as we do this, I want you to know that I have been both. I started out as a Jensenian. I am now a constitutional. And I'm going to actually highlight here why constitutional is more the holistic style of iridology than the other styles that are out there. I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself, and we've got Maria joining us from the Philippines. Hello, Maria. It is so good to see you. I'd love it if you would each take just a moment and let me know who you are so that we can, and where you're from. That's just fun to know where everyone's from. I'd like to introduce myself for just a moment so that you know where I'm coming from and why my information is credible. Okay, that's really important to know that I'm not a fly-by-night, that I'm just not a new kid on the block touting some new fangled something or other that's hasn't got any research behind it. I got into holistic healing over 4 decades ago. I was a very young adult. I had some health problems, and the medical world was not able to pinpoint what was causing them, was not able to help me at all in getting things resolved. That was very frustrating to me. We just lost that back. And there we go. And it was interesting that, you know, there's no coincidences in life, right? Right about that time, I met the man who I married, and I'm still married to, actually. And he was very much into things that were holistic. He was very much into nutrition and herbs and vitamins. He knew a little bit about iridology, and he got me started, only we had no idea what was going to happen. And when I say that, I mean, I was in university to be a school teacher, and he and I fell in love. I grabbed onto everything he was teaching me. I dropped out of university just shy of graduating, decided that being a school teacher for children was not going to be my really happy place, even though it's what I had wanted to do, I thought, since I could remember. And he and I got married, we started our family, and I had the opportunity to continue my studies in holistic health. And that is why I'm here. So I have now been a holistic health coach for 4 decades. Over those many, many years, I've achieved many certifications in nutrition, herbology, and many different accreditations in iridology as well. I've also written many books, self-authored, that's redundant. I've authored many books and self-published and self-distributed them, because back then I didn't know any other way to do it. Pregnancy Naturally, the Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, the Essential Guide to Nature's Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and 2, the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology Textbook, which is a digital book that is available to students in my Dynamic Iridology course. I've also created and taught many courses. Way back when I first started, there was not a lot of information out there about herbs and nutrition. We had Ladine Griffin, we had, excuse me, Jethro Kloss, a few things like that. I grabbed any courses I could. Most of them were old school correspondence courses. There was nothing being offered locally, and we didn't have the internet. So I amassed a library, and I studied and got whatever certifications I could through wherever I could. And then I created a level 1 herbology course, which was 20 hours of herbal training for home use, how to use commercially available herbs. Right? I wasn't teaching harvesting. I wasn't teaching herbal preparation. I was simply teaching what could these herbs be used for? How could you use them safely in your home? That course was such a success. We used to teach it 3 times a year through the City of Calgary Leisure Learning Department. And we were booked out at 20 students each time. And often my coordinator would ask, do you have time to add another evening to teach this course twice? And we would. We were always fully registered. Graduates from that course wanted more. So We created a level 2, which was 16 hours of how to understand herbal combinations that are commercially available, how to understand the ingredients, how to understand what you could use this for. The front of the label might say that this is good as an eye wash, but when you read the back of the label and look at the ingredients, what else can you use it for? And that course was also hugely successful. I had several students who completed both of those who went on to become lay herbalists in their own right, coaching and helping and mentoring other people, which was wonderful. I also designed biokinesiology and color therapy level 1 and level 2 as a course and wrote the book for that. I was a certified prenatal educator for a few years with the International Childbirth Education Association. So I designed and taught antenatal classes. I've also had designed the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course, which is an IPA approved course. If you're familiar with the International Iridology Practitioners Association, you know that they divide their curriculum into level 1 and level 2. And my Dynamic Iridology Assessment course includes all of level 1 and all of level 2 to prepare my students for certification with IPA, should they so choose. And we'll talk at the end of this presentation, at the end of this little workshop, a little bit about the next course that I have starting on November 11th. I am also a member of the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals and the Canadian Association of Natural Nutritional Practitioners. And those are both organizations that you have to have a certain standard of training. You have to prove that you've passed your courses with various colleges, holistic health colleges, in order to apply for membership here. I'm also a proud member of the Alberta Herbalist Association. I'm a professional member, which means I've also had to provide them with proof of my training and my expertise. With all of this, what I want you to keep in mind is not only do I have the training, but I love teaching. And I hope you see that today. As we are going through our time today, and we've got people joining us on Instagram and on Facebook and on the webinar, I would love it if you've got questions about what we're talking about, if you would post the questions, and if I can possibly answer them for you in the limitations of the time we have today, I will do that. When we look at iridology, we know that there are many different iridology maps out there. We're going to look at these a little bit. When I first started out over 4 decades ago, the only iridology that was available was what I call popular iridology. It was the iridology that was taught by Bernard Jensen. That's all that was available where I live. The woman I learned it from had gone to Escondido, California to study with Dr. Jensen a few times. And so I studied with her and I learned, what she was teaching. And so I've got that foundation. I did Jensening iridology for probably close to, I was solid for 5 years and then started to waffle on it, but did it for about another 5 years. After that, while I was sorting out, was I really going to stay in iridology? Was this actually going to be where I was going to head with all the nutrition and the herbal training I was amassing as well? These are some of the iridology maps that I've accumulated over the time. I still have this one, which was the original Dr. Bernard Jensen map. And then this is Ellen Tart Jensen, Dr. Bernard Jensen's daughter-in-law, has updated the map in many, many ways. We've got this one by Mickey Jones. We've got this one by Harry Wolf. And you'll notice that there are a lot of similarities. There are some differences as well. But what I see happening when we use these kinds of charts is that iridologists fall into the trap of doing the popular iridology. And by that, here's what I mean by that. When we see maps like this, the challenge, the thing that we are so tempted to do is to diagnose and prescribe. Right? Because we've just subdivided the body down into minute little sections. Now remember that these charts in real life, these circles that are representing the irides, are about 5 to 6 inches across on the printed page. Now I'm going to move my camera closer for those who were on Instagram with me. When we look at these charts that have these little tiny areas, let's come down to this one. and we recognize that this is about 5 to 6 inches across. If we shrink this down to the size of an actual iris, which is about a ½ inch across, how big are these little areas going to be? How easy is it going to be to actually pinpoint accurately, specifically those areas? When we look at an iris, and we'll be looking at many, we will see the fiber structure of the iris, and the fibers that we see in particularly the lymphatic and biliary eyes are called trabeculae. Now, the trabeculae are there on the hematogenic eyes. We just don't see them because of the amount of pigment that is over the iris. So when we see that, these areas we're going to find would be maybe 2 or 3 trabeculae wide, which means that if you are not absolutely precise in how you assess where these areas are, your quote unquote diagnosis could be absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. When we subdivide an eye into minuscule little pieces like this, it makes it so easy for us to want to prescribe, to diagnose and prescribe. And we know that that is actually not a very holistic approach to things. Now, I know you've probably seen people on social media offering free iris analyses, right? And they'll focus on a tiny detail, and they will give a long list of the things that are wrong with the person. And they might also give a long list of things that the person should be doing. My question to you is, how helpful is that? How helpful is that? Because when we look at constitutional iridology, we approach it from an entirely different way. So in the early 1990s, I studied constitutional iridology. My first teacher, although it was not face-to-face, this is back in the days of VHS videotapes. If you know what a VHS videotape is, give me a thumbs up or a smile or something in the media. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. I've just dated myself quite seriously. But that was how I started learning constitutional. I bought Harry Wolf's Constitutional Iridology VHS videotapes, and I studied them incredibly. I think it was like 6 hours of training. It wasn't a whole lot, but it probably took me 18 to 20 hours to go through them. And I went through them over and over and over again, making notes and studying and working to understand. Based on what I learned from there, I went on to study with Bill Cardona, who was Harry Wolf's business partner, and did a couple more face-to-face trainings where I brought Bill to Calgary, where we did 2-day workshops and really taught this and wrote exams and whatnot. And it has since grown from there. But what I really want to focus on right here is this map. This is a constitutional map. It is built on the structure that Bill Cardona laid out. I have updated it with his permission. And what you will notice is we don't have little teeny things in these gaps that are things that would be metabolically pretty unimportant. For example, we don't have a knee, hip, and leg. That will not be metabolically important for most people. We don't have an arm and a hand and a shoulder. Those are not things that for most people are going to affect how their endocrine system works, how their digestive system works, really not going to have a huge effect metabolically. So we want to focus on the holistic approach, which means we need to be able to take that step back and look at how the body works as an integrated whole. Now, when we look back, I'm just going to pop back for a moment if I can here. Let me pop back here. For example, if we were looking at any one of these maps and we were to look down and find the kidney area, actually, let's come over to this map. For example, as much as I love Harry Wolf, absolutely adore the man, love the way he teaches, love his actual, the way he is very blunt about things. He even breaks it down, not just a kidney, but in here somewhere, and I can't see it on this because it's a small map, small copy of it, the renal pelvis. Well, we don't have a herb or a dietary plan that works on just the renal pelvis, to the best of my knowledge. Now, maybe we do, but in 40 years, I've not discovered it. But I do have herbs and dietary plans that work to support the kidneys. I can create a nutrition plan and a herbal program to support the kidneys if there are kidney stones, or if there are recurring kidney infections, or if we've got a diagnosis from a doctor of inflammation in the kidneys, or if we see a predisposition towards inflammation in some area. So this understanding of what goes on in the kidney is really important, but it's also important to understand, how do the organs actually connect to one another? How does the liver impact, let's say, the pancreas? How do the kidneys impact, I don't know, the blood and lymph? How does the thyroid impact the ovaries? How does the brain impact anything it wants to? How do the lungs and the sinuses interact together, and with the bronchioles? So this is why it is so important for us as holistic practitioners to understand anatomy and physiology. It's one of the reasons why IPA requires you to have proof of an anatomy physiology course before you can complete your certification requirements, right? And because we understand these interactions, because we understand how the organs work together, we also understand that the eyes show us inherent predispositions. They don't show us, as far as the actual irides themselves, they don't show us a current condition. We get more indications about current conditions by the shape of the pupil and by what's going on in the sclera. The iris itself, however, is inherent. All right, so as a Jensenian iridologist, I would have told this person that he had congested lymphatics. Absolutely guaranteed you have congested lymphatics. I would have told him that he was very over acid and probably had a lot of inflammation in his body. And I would have told him that he likely had problems eliminating through the skin. And I would have told him that from the eyes. I would have told him that he needed to do certain things for his skin, like maybe dry skin brushing. I would have told him he needed a lymphatic detox. I would have told him that his diet had to be alkaline. Now, in truth, each of those things may be absolutely correct, but that is not very holistic of me to just look at the eyes and tell him what's wrong. He may actually have an organic diet, an organic low acid forming diet. He might actually do body scrubs frequently to keep his skin healthy. He might be doing everything right. We need to remember that the eyes show us his inherent potential. So while we know that his skin doesn't want to work right, doesn't want to do all of its work, if he's doing body scrubs 2 or 3 times a week, he's helping his skin to work better. But this is not going to change in his eye because this is an inherent marking. When we see the things in the eyes that suggest that the lymphatic system inherently wants to be congested, he may be doing no dairy products, no white flour, no white sugar. He may be getting regular physical activity and even lymphatic drainage massage, in which case he is taking excellent care of his lymphatic system. These markings are genetic. They're inherent. They're not going to go away. But because he's doing the right things, he will experience better health. Is this making sense? Is this making sense? When we look and see that he is predisposed to being over acid and having inflammation, again, he maybe figured this out a long time ago. He maybe figured out that the white flour, white sugar, red meat were not the best things that he could be eating, and that when he ate them, when he drank coffee, for instance, that he would seize up, that his body would inflame and would seize up. So he may have taken those things out of his diet completely so that he can enjoy better health. But the eyes will always tell us, the irides themselves will always tell us not what is going on right now, not whether he's falling apart or not, but they will always tell us what his inherent potentials are. Does this make sense? If this makes sense, give me a thumbs up. You'll find that I give you more information when you interact with me. If I think that everybody's asleep, I just might end early. Just saying. All righty. So a Jensenian iridologist, and Victoria, thank you for that, Victoria. And Ruth says, I'm here. Thank you very much. I appreciate knowing that you're awake and present and accounted for. I love that. Thank you. A Jensenian iridologist would say that this person, because we've got all of this color variation in here, is very, very toxic and needs to do a cleanse. They would say that these eyes would turn blue if this person does enough of the cleansing work as well. Right now, here's the problem. None of that is accurate. I used to tell people that, and we would put them on the most intense cleanses and the most intense dietary programs, and they would follow them. We would have regular check-ins, and they were following the programs, and we were not seeing these eyes change, because Jensenians say the eyes change when you do stuff. And AJ1 Lucy on Instagram says she's driving. Pay attention to the road, Lucy. Just don't pay too much attention here, okay? And so again, Jensenians would say these eyes will become blue with deep cleansing. Well, now we know that that is not true. They would say that I was taught that 3 rings going around the eye like this means that this person is headed for a nervous breakdown or is just recovering from one. We now know that's not true. They would say that these lines say this person has parasites. Well, parasites are not a genetic thing. We know that that is not true. They would say that this person has skin problems. Well, we do have some what we call rarefaction in zone 7, which means there is the inherent potential for skin problems, but there is not a guarantee here that this person has skin problems. So again, for all the cleanses, all the fasts, all the supplements, all the dietary changes I've ever recommended to clients who were faithful in dotting their I's, crossing their T's, drinking their water, taking their supplements, cleaning up their diet, I've never seen eyes change color. Pigment, like what we see in here, all this brown, for instance, is inherent. It accumulates under genetic influences. It does not disperse. Each base eye color, so whether it's lymphatic or biliary, as this one is, or a true brown as a hematogenic eye, has its own inherent set of traits for health and risks for health. In constitutional iridology, this iris has the inherent predispositions towards liver insufficiency and potentially some predispositions towards having elevated acid in the blood, not in the stomach, but in the blood and in the fluids that surround the cells. Notice I said has inherent predispositions, because without having a conversation with the client to understand what they're actually doing for diet, for lifestyle, for supplements, how they're managing their health and their wellness, we can't really offer an interpretation at all. We can say where we see the predisposition towards inherent weaknesses or inherent challenges or inherent insufficiencies, but we cannot, until we've had that conversation, know for sure what we want to say to the client. So, with this client, we are going to ask them, they're going to come in with symptoms, right? Clients always come in with problems they want solved. And so we are going to combine their symptoms with what we see in the eye, with what we learn from them about their diet and their lifestyle in order to create a program for them, in order to help them understand what their next step is in improving their health. I am going to tell you that with this kind of an eye, it is probably always going to be wise to support the liver, because that is, from the colors we see in here, a predominant predisposition. Like, this person should not be drinking coffee, should not be consuming alcohol, should be not consuming white sugar, should not be using chemicalized foods, right? We would want to be recommending that they have a diet that is rich in bitter greens, like lots of leafy greens, good water. I love leafy greens for the liver. I really do. It's one of my favorite things to recommend. And those are some very basic things that we can do. We can go emotional on this. We know the liver is where we store anger, bitterness, and resentment. So maybe this person needs to be learning to forgive and let go. These eyes are never going to change blue. No matter what we do, they are never going to change. This is a true hematogenic eye, a true brown eye. So when we look at this, we need to really understand the client's health predispositions. When you understand a true hematogenic eye, you understand so much. There is so much information here, and a lot of people go, well, it's hard to read, you can't see the details. There are details here that are really important. This eye again suggests a predominant liver risk potential and the potential of blood issues, but we have to ask questions. We have to understand what the client's personal history is, what their family history is. As it turns out, this woman likely has a liver predisposition that probably leads her to not be able to methylate her B vitamins. Her eyes alone didn't give me that detail, but in having a conversation with her, in light of what her irides look like, and in light of the fact that they had been trying to conceive, she and her husband had been trying to conceive for 3 years, that these two things together suggest to me there's a methylation problem. And as I continued to ask her questions, and we learned that she'd been diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome and type 2 diabetes as well. This is not the classic eye you would expect to have a type 2 diabetes diagnosis. But I know that from all of that, that methylation is a very common problem for people that have that kind of a symptom package. And it's interesting that when we did add methylated B vitamins in the form of a really good prenatal vitamin, plus a little extra methylated folate and methylated B12, she was able to conceive, right? And I wouldn't have known to do that if I hadn't seen her eyes and asked her questions. Jensen would say this woman definitely has current liver issues just from the images, and would likely have given a liver supplement, which certainly could be very helpful here, but that may not have dealt with the methylation issue. She would likely not have been able to conceive. When we look at the fact that she has this, which Jensen would call an arcus senilis, when we, in constitutional, we would call this a lipemic diathesis, and specifically a corneal arcus. We understand that the liver is involved in this as well. It's involved in how the body is processing carbohydrates. And you know that the carbs are what the body uses to manufacture cholesterol. And we use that to balance out the hormones, correct? We see here that we've got these lines, again, radiating outward, that Jensenians would say are parasite lines, which we know that they're not parasite lines. Parasites are not genetic. I cannot, if I've got parasites, I cannot pass them on to my children through my DNA, right? And so this is suggesting nerve interruptions of a different sort. So constitutional iridology is a holistic assessment tool, and it requires that we have a conversation with the client. I find that when I use constitutional iridology to guide the questions, so I have my client's symptoms, I do the eye photos. From that, I connect the symptoms to the photos to ask questions, that my clients feel like they're being heard, because the questions I'm asking them are relevant only to them. It's not a smattering, broad questionnaire that I'm using. I'm asking questions that are relevant to my client. Then we want to consider photos like this that have different little flecks of color in them. Now, a North American iridologist would say that this indicates toxicity, that these people need to cleanse this out, that cleansing will actually dissolve and remove these pigments. Constitutional iridologists instead say these pigments are inherent. They can develop over time under the influence of genetic cues, right? And this is getting into the realm of epigenetics. And when we see these pigments develop over time, it helps us to understand where more of the inherent challenges are surfacing as the person gets older, as the person matures. It's also important to remember that color reproduction over various screens is really unpredictable. And so these flecks may look orange on your computer, or they might look brown, or they may look rust colored. And so because of that, we are not going to talk about the exact meaning of the different colors, because each of those can mean something very different. This is another challenge with doing an iris analysis over social media, is you don't know how the color is being displayed on the observer's screen. I have 4 computer screens, a tablet, and a smartphone. Every one of those screens, including the 2 that are connected to the same computer, shows color differently. And so it is so important that we avoid diagnosing based simply on images. We need to have a conversation with the client. Again, the color of the pigment teaches us which organ has a predisposition towards being unbalanced. The placement of the pigment tells us which organs are going to suffer the fallout of that imbalance. So it's important, again, to understand your anatomy and physiology at a fairly deep level to get how these pigments actually function. In North American iridology, this iris would be assessed as being extremely toxic and would require a massive amount of cleansing. The rings that are coming around, they would say chronic stress. The rings are inherent. They are indicative that this person spends most of their time functioning in the sympathetic nervous system. So they're always ready for fight, flight, or freeze. And so that tells us much about their nutritional requirements. But in Jensenian, we were taught that this person is headed for a nervous breakdown or having a nervous breakdown, right? We know that, again, that the white clouding at the edge from Jensenian would say blockages in the arteries, and we need to clean that out. And as we clean out the arteries, this is going to go away. They would call it a sodium cholesterol ring. In constitutional, this type of eye suggests liver insufficiencies. As in a predisposition to that, again, we don't know what this client is doing that is supportive of the liver until we have the conversation with them. This is something we really work on in class. We look at eyes, we learn to assess the markings, and as we get better at naming the markings, then we start asking, what are questions these markings make you want to ask? And then we start adding case studies of this is the person's history. Here are the eyes. What questions do you want to ask when you connect their history and their symptoms to their eyes? So important. So as we look at this again, the contraction throws here suggest this person is a go-getter. The white out here at the edge suggests that there could be a liver imbalance that may be messing up the carbohydrate metabolism. So we would need to have a conversation with this client about how do you handle stress? What do you do to mitigate your stress? Do you crave carbohydrates? And I would want to see some lab tests. I would have them go back to their medical doctor to do a cholesterol panel. I would want total cholesterol, HDL, LDL. I would probably, in this case, also want a hemoglobin A1C. And I'm going to ask for a lot of questions. Cassiandi Cassie Diana is asking, can I speak on the inconsistent pupil shape of this iris? I won't address that specifically, but I will give you a little bit, which says, first off, flattenings tell us where there are dynamic imbalances that we are likely going to need to address, because this teaches us about the current functioning of the nervous system. When we see little divots like this is actually showing us more about the integrity of the stomach lining. I hope that helps you, Cassie Diana. Only when we have that conversation with the client and we understand their current symptoms and their past personal and family history can we actually make solid recommendations. So important, so important. A North American iridologist would look at this beautiful hematogenic eye and say this person has parasites. Again, parasites don't change our genetic structure. The presence of parasites in the eye is not going to show up in the iris unless the worm is actually in the eye. And there are some parasites that live just under the very surface of the eye. Gross, right? But parasites that are in your body are not going to change your genetic structure. Constitutional instead says this person is very prone to having sympathetic nervous system responses. Again, we've got lots of those contraction furrows. When we see that, we're going to talk about stress. How does the person mitigate stress? We're going to look at the nutritional requirements that creates for them. You might be working with someone who already is controlling their stress. They're already offloading it. Maybe they do yoga or they work out regularly, they get enough sleep, their diet is really good, they're really managing things well, in which case we don't need to necessarily address this, but we would want to congratulate our client for doing good things for their health and explain to them how what they are doing is supporting their body. Help them understand the breadth and the depth of everything they're doing. Does that make sense? This isn't just about pulling our client apart and shredding them and showing them every weakness they've got, which is really what I learned as a Jensenian iridologist. Constitutional is also about recognizing what they're doing that is helpful and helping them to understand the importance of continuing those things. When we look at this was another female client, and we've got multiple markings in this 33 to 35 minute zone, which is the ovaries. We've got a marking at about 15 minutes. We've got this break in the collarette over here, which spans through stomach and intestines and through heart, bronchioles, parathyroid. These are all areas that I would ask questions if they were appropriate. If this was a female client, which it is, and she was coming to me for bronchial questions, I'm not going to come and talk about her ovaries in that appointment. I'm going to work on the bronchial things first, get her getting some good progress there, right? Because I see that we've got some challenges potentially up there. We're going to work with anything that's related to the bronchioles. And when we've got progress there, then I may ask her, how are the ovaries? How's your reproductive system, right? Because what we want to remember is our clients really, particularly in a first appointment, but in most appointments, only need to hear and only want to hear the best immediate answers to advance their health one more step. Overloading them with the information they need to deal with their health for the rest of their lives, all in one appointment, is not going to help anybody. So we want to manage, we want to coach our clients in manageable steps. The next layer of information we want to consider here is the structure. How are the fibers sitting in the eye? This is inherent. This is not going to change. We cannot cleanse this lacuna out of the eye. We cannot cleanse this into going straighter. So Samira can you explain the difference between Jensenian and constitutional? So Samira, you've registered for the webinar. You will receive the replay link. I'm going to ask you to go back and watch that because I don't have time to go back and do that. I actually have the course that I teach that my students have paid for starts in 18 minutes. So we're gonna go high speed here to finish up this presentation. So again, a North American iridologist would map every one of these. Every one of these lacunae would be a pathological problem. Every pigment would be a pathological problem happening right now. And that is not how we do constitutional. I mean, this person would then have brain, pituitary, bronchioles, adrenal stuff, kidney, perineum, rectum. We've got more stuff happening through the lung region here. And Jensenian would be fasting, cleansing, building to try to make these marks go away. And they're not going to go away. These marks are inherited. And because of that, we need to ask about a personal and family history of. Remember, this means that this person has inherited the potential to have some challenges in these areas. Inheriting a potential doesn't mean that they have to manifest those problems. So we want to find out what are the symptoms they are concerned with right now. What is their personal history in relation to symptoms that correlate to markings in the eyes? And from there, we want to begin creating a program for them that will take them up one step in their health. Markings like this can be passed down 3 to 4 generations. And so these might actually be health problems that the great-grandparents had, right? But that this person doesn't have because there's been enough good things happening. So we want to make sure that we always find out what is this person doing for their health. Again, in North American iridology, every marker, every fiber that is going off on a tangent, like this one up here, every pigment, anything that is not perfect needs to be addressed. And it's pretty overwhelming. There's a lot that could be said about an eye. Right? With holistic iridology, the idea is to integrate the markings to understand how the inherent predispositions can work together to create the symptoms the client is experiencing. Okay, markings may have a different value and impact and interpretation depending on which other markings are present. A marking is never assessed individually, right? That would be a very Jensenian approach. Markings are always assessed collectively, holistically, looking at the body and the spirit, everything as a whole. More than that, this deeper understanding of how things work together, whether it's this pigment combined with these pigments, or this pigment combined with this rarefaction, or this fiber combined with the rarefaction and the pigment that are here. Understanding how these work together helps us to understand at a deeper level, metabolically, what we need to recommend to create programs that do way more than address symptoms, but programs that actually get to the root of the problem. A North American iridologist would look at this eye and say this person has a weak constitution. Makes it sound like this person is delicate and fragile and doomed to a sickly life. Right? We've got all kinds of of lacunae with lots of rarefaction. We've got lots of gaping between the fibers. We've got lots of small lacunae down here. We've got pigment. In constitutional iridology, this is called a connective tissue type. With that understanding, we know we will likely need to support digestion and recommend lifestyle and food choices to help this person experience excellent health. You know, with the connective tissue type, we know they are prone to not rebuilding and repairing their tissues really well. That almost always goes back to and is rooted in digestion and in food choices. So if we help them correct food choices, if we support the digestion and really impact that in positive ways, we help them to have the building blocks they need to help them repair tissues more efficiently. Each and every marking is not really important, especially when eyes are as busy as this. Again, we want to take that step back, look at the big picture, and then look at pieces and parts as we need to, but not every little part is important in every appointment. And depending on the client's symptoms, our focus may change, right? but we are still going to integrate an overall what we see, along with that little bit of attention to a focused area. When we see and understand the interrelationship of various constitutional markers, we can begin to work not only restoratively, but preventively. We will never see the irides themselves change. We may see the shape of the pupil change. We hope to see changes in the white of the eye, but we are not going to see pigments disperse or fibers straighten out or areas fill in. How powerful is that, to be able to understand the inherent potentials and create lifestyle programs that could stall off or prevent or begin even mitigating and reversing current health symptoms. It's almost like having a Star Trek tricorder. I've always wanted one of those. That would be so cool. But, we need to remember that we don't want to get bogged down in every detail. And this is what I see when I see a lot of the online iris readings. They get bogged down in every little detail and they never ask questions. When we do holistic iridology, using the iris map is the very last step of the assessment. And sometimes we don't even use it at all because the constitution, the different pigments in here, the fiber structure alone can sometimes give us more than enough information to work with. There are many times when I'm doing an iris analysis when I don't even pull out the iris map because I don't need it. And it's not because I've got it memorized. It's because if this person comes in with sinus issues, for instance, I am going to ask them first off about their diet. I'm going to know that we've got kidneys that want to run the show. We've got a potential for an overproduction of mucus. Both of those spell excess acid. That all leads to inflammation, right? So I didn't even need to look to see what area is inflamed and what are the kidneys, what's happening in the kidney zone or what's happening in the stomach zone, right? Because I see some general tendencies here. And they explain everything just fine. Thank you very much. Really, when we understand iridology in this way, we can actually do a basic assessment from 2 feet away without using even a magnifying glass. All right, we could get our clients started just that quickly and easily without getting even physically too close for them if that was something we were not able to do. Practicing iridology using these principles also helps us to avoid overwhelming our clients with too much information in each appointment. It helps us to get our client programs designed right in our client session. So if you currently are a nutritionist or a herbalist and you're finding that you're doing an intake session with a client, then you're going off and spending 2 or 3 or 4 hours creating a program for them to bring that to the next appointment. When you know how to do constitutional iridology, you cut out that 2 or 3 or 4 hours of unpaid homework, right? Because constitutional iridology helps us it guides our questions. It guides our conversation. It helps us to get the information we need to be able to design our client programs more efficiently and effectively. And to be able to tweak those programs at each appointment, to be able to develop the program that our client needs in manageable steps. Right on. And so with that, I would like to take just a couple of minutes and introduce you to the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System. This is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, and naturopaths who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. As holistic practitioners, we are mostly heart-centered people, and we want to give our clients everything they need. We need to temper that. We need to give them everything they need for now, for the next step. And learning how to do that well actually enhances your client care. And we want to learn this so that we can stop doing that unpaid overtime to create programs. If we spend 3 or 4 hours or even 2 hours creating a client program, we are giving the client too much information. And that amount of information will overwhelm the client. It will keep them from taking action. They will not stick to it, and it's not going to work. If we can design our clients very simply and quickly in our sessions, it will be a manageable amount of information that our clients can actually work with be successful with, move to that next step in their health, and then they will want to come back and learn what is the next thing they need to do, right? And so this creates long-term retention. I've got clients that have been with me now for 39 years. We've done the math. I've got a handful of those. I've got a lot that have been with me for 10 to 20 years. They come in for a few appointments when things are not going right. We get them back on track. They go off and they're doing their homework for a few years. As they get older, stress happens, things happen. They need a tune-up. They come back in for a few more appointments. So they're constantly fading in and out of active involvement with me. And that's brilliant. That's how I want it. The goal of the dynamic iridology assessment system is to teach you constitutional iridology and how to use it confidently so that you can easily integrate what you already know about nutrition and herbology and anatomy and physiology to confidently create doable client programs in your paid client sessions. So with that, my friends, I just want to let you know that the next course of Dynamic Iridology Assessment System is starting on November 11th. Now, each of you who is seeing this can reach out to me through social media, whether you're with me on Facebook or Instagram, or you've attended this webinar live. If you would like information about the course, if you would like to have a conversation with me to see if this course is actually appropriate for you at this point in time, reach out to me and we can just schedule a call to have a conversation to see if this is the right time for you to do this. Excellent. So with this, we're going to wrap up really quickly. A quick comment coming in from the live webinar from Victoria. Great info with this webinar. You've helped me understand a few things better. I'm just starting, still in school, but I need to make outside research to better understand. You were the first one I came across 2 years ago. My mother started her journey then. I am now doing so. Thank you again. So well explained. Oh, Victoria, so glad I could be of help to you. Excellent. And I hope that you will reach out to me about this course as well. And I invite each of you to reach out to me if you are interested in working with iridology professionally. I look forward to speaking with you soon. I hope you have a tremendous rest of your day. Take good care and bye for now.